Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This has been a very interesting debate, actually, and I have to admit that part of what I'm going to speak about today actually exhibits democracy at its finest, despite what members of the opposition have to say. The fact is this is a very personal issue. I know that every time that I see or hear on the news about a person that has lost their life because of a traffic accident, particularly those later at night. I once had somebody tell me that nothing good happens after midnight, and that typically tends to be true. But every time I hear or see something, I hold my breath, hoping that it's not somebody that I know. And fortunately for me, I've never been in that situation, and I always breathe a sigh of relief when I do find out it's no one that I know. But, I say that with some care and attention, to know that there are some people out there that do have family and loved ones that have lost people. And these are some of the most inexcusable deaths we have in our society, and there's no doubt about that. I want to thank the Honourable Solicitor General for his reference earlier to keep me in line with the standing orders. But I do want to admit that the recent, I guess what I would consider bizarre confluence of events that have happened over the last couple of days that have really shone light on this issue has actually forced me to have a change of opinion on this piece of legislation. Many of my caucus members will probably remember that I was very much against this when we discussed this in caucus, probably for many of the same reasons that many of the opposition members have outlined. But for some reason, when I was driving up to Edmonton today after spending the evening in Calgary at a community event last night and thinking about everything that's happened, I wonder, I seem to think and reflected on, that what is happening out there is that we as individual members of society sometimes put ourselves in some very bad positions without even knowing it. And we allow ourselves to be blinded to the facts of reality. And the facts of reality are this. And this is what this bill does, and that is that the science is clear. It's not debatable. It's clear that at 0.5 or at 0.05, every individual faces some sort of impairment in their abilities. And if that's the case, if we're all standing up here and saying we don't think people should drive impaired, then what's the problem with this piece of legislation? To me, that's what this about. That's what this is about. And what is very confusing in this whole debate is also the fact that right now it's become very obvious, and I will be the first to admit that I didn't even know before this debate started coming online that you could actually get your license suspended for 24 hours for blowing over 0.05. So this is nothing new. I think what we shouldn't be talking about is how new this is. What we should be talking about is maybe that there has been a bit of a failure in communicating that was the case, or has been the case for the last 12 years. But now it is explicitly the case. It's being explicitly put in this legislation for those purposes, and that's where we're at now. As I mentioned before, the science is quite clear on this, and if the honourable members that don't believe that putting this reference to 0.05 into this act is the right thing to do, then they really don't have an issue with the government. They have an issue with the scientists, and I would believe that they should maybe take that up in the science community. I know the member for Airdrie-Chestermere kept referencing that this was the PC government telling Albertans what to do. Well, I would suggest that he might want to go have a conversation with the scientists. They might know just a little bit more about the actual science behind impairment than he does. And so one of the things that that I do take issue with some of the members on this side and in their speeches is, and this has been part of the problem that I've seen throughout this whole debate, and a lot of the information that and conversations that I've had from my constituents and the feedback that I've got from my constituents is they're opposed to this because they're saying, you're making me a criminal or a bad guy because I can't go out and have a glass of wine with my dinner, or I can't have a beer with my burger, or a beer at the hockey game and go drive home. The fact is, that's not true. And as much as I appreciate the Minister of Human Services stance that, let's be clear, we don't want any mixed messages, you do not have a drink and drive. If that was the case, if you wanted to make that very clear, it wouldn't be 0.05, it would be 0, period. And so my point is I do know that I can go out and have 2 drinks over dinner and probably drive home and be fine. In fact, I want to share a personal experience with the members of this assembly that I did have about 2 years ago when I went and visited my father, who was working in Arizona. Him and myself and a couple other family members went out for dinner to a nice Mexican restaurant. I had 2 margaritas with my dinner. We were coming home. I pull out of the parking lot. Of course, I don't know my way around the town. I'm driving. I go to turn left at the lights. My father says, no, it's the next set of lights. So I get back into the straight ahead lane. And of course, there's a sheriff, a state trooper behind me, pulls me over, asks if I've been drinking, said I had 2 drinks. Of course, I go through the rigmarole. The fact is, when it came down to it, I didn't even register on their blower thing or whatever. But it was certainly a lesson. And that's probably, I know that's probably not the technical term. Okay, the breathalyzer. But the point is it's become very clear to me, and this is something that I've sort of adopted in my life as what it is. 2 drinks, and I'm okay. Anything more than that, it's not 1 more. 2 drinks for me, and people have to go and ask themselves some tough questions and do some research about whether that might be appropriate for their body type or the activity that they're doing during that day. But for me, generally, I'm okay. But what happens is we have a culture, and I know the ministers have talked about changing the culture, where 2 drinks we feel fine, so we say, 1 more. I know everybody around here's done that, right? And then 1 more turns into 1 more. And before you know it, you've actually only thought you had 1 more and you think it's okay to drive home. And that's when you put yourselves in those very difficult situations, right? And we know the science has said if at 0.05 you are impaired, bottom line when it comes to the safety of our children and in our streets, that if that's what it is, that should be the law. The final thing that I just wanted to address, I know there's been some of the conversation that I've got in my office around this is that this bill makes the police the judge, jury, and executioner on this. Well, I think this bill has a very clever clause in it in that it allows the person that's pulled over to be able to go and ask to be they're tested on another device or taken to a detachment or a police station to blow into one of the more reliable devices that are used to be admissible in court. And I would have to say that if we don't trust those, what's the point of even addressing this issue to whether it's at 0.05 or 0.08? If we don't trust the science behind those, what's the point? And the point is that we are giving every citizen that is found to be in this situation the opportunity to be able to, what I would say is be found guilty or not guilty on a scientific piece of machinery that is much better than anything any judge, jury, or executioner can provide. So I think that there's some protection in there for people. Just to conclude this evening, why I started off by saying I think this has been a good exercise in democracy. For me, listening to the debate, that's happened in this legislature, listening to the debate that's happened outside of this legislature, the information that's come to my constituency office on behalf of constituents, has actually forced me to change my original position on this, because I've gotten more information and done some self-reflection about what this really means today in our society. And to say that we haven't had enough time, or there hasn't been enough debate, or there isn't enough information out there, frankly means that I think you're being lazy, okay, and that you're not listening. And I can respect that some might have a certain disposition to this, and I certainly do. But I think it's, and I've always said this to my constituents, I will probably come towards issues with a certain disposition, and it might take me a considerable amount to talk me out of that. But at least as your representative, I need to be opened to compelling reasons and strong rationale as to convince me that my original position is not the right one. And in this case, Mr. Speaker, that has happened for me, and I can tell you, my wife will tell you that usually doesn't happen. You can't really usually talk me out of very much. But in this case, this has. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say one thing: is that, and in this, I did make this point in caucus during our discussions. I want to make it in the legislature. I think it brings in a number of pieces that a number of members of this legislature have brought up, is that this is one piece of the pie in dealing with this issue that we have in our province of impaired driving. And the other pieces obviously are increased enforcement. Yes, I would like to, like the member for Airdrie-Chestermere, see us put more emphasis and more resources into check stops. I think that would be a positive. I think this Premier is very open to that. I would like to see us embark on an educational campaign that really engages people in what the whole science around this is and what it means to be impaired, and how you should reflect personally on what your limitations are. And then finally, obviously, the alternative transportation methods is a challenge. I've always had a big issue with the lack of availability of cabs in the city of Calgary. It's a huge issue. I know that's not our issue, but I think as a society collectively, this is something we need to do. If we piece this piece of legislation with the three other things that I just mentioned, I think we as a society will come to a greater understanding of what we need to do to deal with this issue, and we might actually see progress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.